Hey YouTube, in this video you're going to see how I break down the hindquarter on a deer I shot this fall. Hope you enjoy it. Alright, so I have my hindquarter here that I'm going to go ahead and break down. I used to cut these, you see a lot of people where they'll go around and take the hip bone out, go around through the ball socket and everything. The last time I did this, I just split it right down the middle with a saw, and I actually preferred that way to any way I had done it thus far. So I'm going to try that method again this time and see how it works out. I just felt like I made fewer cuts where I ended up accidentally cutting into some steaks or roasts inadvertently. So one thing I want to do on this side is I'm just going to kind of split right down the middle through any of the meat initially. And again, you're just kind of finding that there's a little ridge in the pelvis back there, and just trying to go through that. So I found my spot to cut. Now we got both quarters cut in half. Again, I just made one little cut on either side here and then cut right through the pelvis. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this, because you are essentially cutting into a little bit of where the spinal column would be. If you're in an area with CWD, you probably don't want to do this and expose your meat to those potential prions. So that's one area where I would just cut around the hip socket, take the hip off that way. Otherwise, I found that I really like this way a little bit better. I'll show you some more once we get into the more cuts. Alright, I have now my hind quarter. You can tell there's a little bit of dried blood and stuff. Some people will go ahead and trim all this right away. I'll show you why I don't always trim it right away. There is a little bit of hair and stuff on here. We'll get to cleaning all that up. You want to make sure you get all that off before you finish your steaks and everything. Any big stuff, try and get off right away or as best you can. Then the muscle groups, really, you're just trying to find the different separations in the meat to pull these apart. So we'll start off by taking a little bit of the silver skin and fat off of there. And I don't do a lot of real good trimming at this point. I'm just trying to find how these muscle groups separate. So you'll see right here is a seam where that muscle comes together. And I'm just pulling that apart. And you can see it's a fairly thin muscle right there, but it took a lot of that discolored meat off. I can trim that up a little bit and save a little bit of that for hamburger. But now it's just following those separations in the meat to separate your muscle groups. And I use my hands a lot. Try and use my knife as little as possible. So you can see where my hand is. This big muscle group is real big here, kind of narrows down, and you can get your hand under and feel right where it connects by the knee here. So once I feel that, that's where it's going to end and separate. So we'll cut right there, and just using my knife a little bit to help that separation. again, because we left the hip on here, that it's still going to be connected to the hip up here, so we'll have to disconnect the muscle group here, and then you can kind of use your hands and knife a little bit, and then we'll have to use our knife to disconnect it from the hip up here as well. And this is where I feel like I lose less meat because I cut the hip versus using my knife earlier to get it off the hip bone. And you can see there, that muscle came right out of there. Alright, so we got our first muscle group out of there. The next one I think I'm going to take off is going to be this top here, which will be your sirloin tip. This, again, you can kind of see is connected right by the knee here. So I'm going to make a cut here, and then you can see this line of separation here. It's also connected there, and then we'll have to make another cut along the back. So we'll start making some of those cuts. Again, we'll get to that separation. And you just need to, like I did, just kind of nick it open, and you can really get your hand in there and separate it a lot more instead of fishing around with your knife and end up cutting into your roast a lot more. So again, I can feel the muscle come up under and over here, so I'm going to make a cut right here to disconnect there. Come over. Now I'll spin this around so you can see the cut I'm making here. Now this is also connected on the femur bone right here, so I'm just cutting along the femur bone, and this is what will go back to that hip socket. And going around the kneecap there. Just about get under the femur there. I'm just trying to feel on this side where I'm connected yet. And there, cut this little bit of undesirable stuff off of here. Trim that up again. A little bit of burger meat on there. Again, this needs just a little bit more trimming up. Some of the silver skin and stuff we'll do a little later, but there's your sirloin. And again, this makes a really nice roast. You can do some steaks with it. Or hamburger too, and again we'll trim up some of that fat connective tissue, but for breaking it down, that's how that muscle comes out, and it comes out pretty quick. Alright, the next muscle group I'm going to take out lays right here. And this is what would be your eye of round. It's a really nice cut of meat. I'm going to trim off some of this fat and connective tissue. It looks very similar to the inside tenderloin on a deer. Tastes real good. We use this at our house for stir fry sometimes. Another really fun thing I've done with this and the inside tenderloin is just to smoke it whole and then save it for a special occasion, deer camp next year or some holiday or birthday. Pull it out of the freezer and just slice it thin and have it with some crackers or good cheese, and it's really, really nice. So again, I'll trim this fat off of here, but you can see it looks real similar to a tenderloin. Came out real fast, and that would be your eye of round cut. Wanted to go over real quick, there's a little bit of fat now that I want to take out. It's actually fat, connective tissue, veins and arteries, and there's a lymph node right here, this big hard glob of fat that you want to make sure that you take all of this out. You don't want to eat any of that, and that sits kind of in the middle of all that. So trimming that out, and you'll want to make sure that you discard all of that. None of that is anything that you want to eat. So just wanted to point that out. That's where the lymph node is in your hindquarter, to make sure you take it out of that. All right, we really just have one more big muscle group for steak left. I believe this is the bottom round now that we have to take off. Kind of goes up here along the hip and then attaches down to near the calf muscle on the leg. So if you just kind of feel, and you can see right here is the seam, and when you put your hand in there, you'll feel that it attaches right about here. So I'm just going to take my knife and just make a cut along there, and you'll see it just separates right from near the calf muscle. Separate those tendons. And now, this might be a little bit trickier. I'm going to push that hip down and just follow along the hip bone to separate that. And you can hear I snap the ball socket of the hip, and I'm just following that muscle group down, feeling where the hip bone is. There's that little pin bone, some people call it. And this is where I feel like cutting the hindquarter in half and not deboning. I feel like I ruin a lot less part of the bottom round in this area trying to fish my knife around that hip socket. So now I've pretty much got it down to the end, and I'm just cutting through fat on the other side. So there, I've got my bottom round off. Again, there's a lot of fat on this side. I'll show you in a minute how I go about trimming this off that tends to work pretty well for getting this piece of meat cleaned up. We'll go over that in a minute. Alright, so we've pretty much taken off all the steaks from our hindquarter, or from this hindquarter. What's left is going to be the lower leg shank. You kind of have your calf muscle in there. This can be used for burger, for ground up meat, for sausage. You can do before, like I talked about on the front leg, cut some discs and do that ossobuco. That's a really good cut for that one. And then around the hip here, there's a little bit of meat left on here that I'm going to trim up, and that'll all pretty much be hamburger meat. You'll just want to make sure, again, you take away all this fat. You don't want any of that in there. Trim it up real good. Okay, this is the bottom round again that we were talking about, that I wanted to show you a little bit of how I end up cleaning up this piece of meat. Kind of start on the edges and trim off any of this, a lot of this silver skin and fat, and just trying to follow the seam. And eventually I'm just trying to make like a square piece of meat, and I'll clean up some of these smaller pieces and get anything I can get off of there, any meat I can get off of there. But really, this is just like filleting a fish. So if you can fillet a fish, you can do this cut. You can start from any end, but kind of sliding your knife in and working your way along. I know I say that and I'm not doing the best job here. Start at the end like you would on a fillet and just try and press down against that fat layer on the bottom as if that were the fish's skin. And then as you come through, just slide like that and it peels right off. You skinned all the silver skin off of this side. There's still a little bit of fat will trim up, but there's really not much there. You can see that's pretty thin, and then any hair, debris, anything that was on that side we got rid of, and we just have a really nice piece of meat left. I just find that works really well on this piece of meat. Gets a lot of the silver skin and fat off in one cut. Again, there is a little bit there to trim up yet, but it's really not that bad. And then for this silver skin on this side, I'll basically do the same thing. I'll slide my knife in on this side, work it down, and we'll get rid of all the silver skin there. And again, that's a really nice piece of meat for steaks. You could do a whole roast with it. Makes really great jerky. A lot of things you can do, but that's the easiest way I've found to kind of clean up that piece of meat, or at least get rid of a lot of it without making a lot of little cuts. Just that one big kind of fillet cut, and you're good to go. I hope you enjoyed that video on how I break down the hind quarter on the deer. If you did, please click the like button and leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to know if there's anything you do a little bit differently. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.